Hello, friend. John Dalton here, Further Emergence podcast, where we go into consciousness, love, and the mystery. And in this episode, we're going into being fiercely kind, the open heart, earning a living, getting through, remaining soft and fluffy, fears, self-sabotage, and unmet needs. But before we do that, let's have a quick review of the memes on the Further Emergence Instagram feed. Now, the first one, I didn't write this one, but it's very good. It says, keep my anger from becoming meanness, keep my sorrow from collapsing into self-pity, keep my heart soft enough to keep breaking, keep my anger turned towards justice, not cruelty. Remind me that all of this, every bit of it, is for love. Keep me fiercely kind. That's brilliant, isn't it? There's so many little gems in there. Sorrow from collapsing into self-pity. Heart soft enough to keep breaking. That's hard, isn't it? To keep your heart soft enough. Which basically is sort of saying being vulnerable, from keeping vulnerable. Keep my anger turned towards justice, not cruelty. That's very easy to happen, for it to turn into cruelty. So yeah, that's a cracker, that one. Next one I did write, didn't make the picture. It's a big red picture of a heart, an anatomical heart on a black background. And what I wrote about it was, it's called the open heart. It says, the heart is often described as a pump, clenching like a fist to drive blood around the body, but that's not what's really going on. As we develop embryologically, the heart begins as a ribbon of muscle that folds around itself to form the heart. The heart doesn't clench in on itself to pump blood. Instead, it moves in an unraveling motion, stretching out to return to that flat ribbon shape. Instead of pumping blood, this stretching and unraveling motion causes a vacuum that sucks blood around the body. This is a beautiful distinction because it highlights that our hearts are continually opening and expanding. An opening and expanding heart is a lovely focus for right now. Let my heart open continuously to love. So that's beautiful, isn't it? And it's such a great thing to think about, because when you think about all the problems that people have with their heart, a lot of it is to do with tightness, tension. I've got tension in my chest, closing down and all that kind of thing. Whereas when you realize that your heart is designed, or the way it is created is it's kind of folding in on itself, and it's unfolding. And it's this unfolding action that actually sucks blood through it. Now, there's a lot more to how blood actually moves around your body, and walking around bare feet on grass, on the ground, is very helpful for that, because one of the reasons that the blood, or one of the things that aids blood, is the electronic transfer of ions. So walking around on the ground really helps that, because your heart is not a big enough pump to actually be able to pump the blood around. It's more of a transition station. So there are other things that are helping your blood move around your body, one of them being barefoot. But this idea of it opening rather than pumping and squeezing is a beautiful change in focus. So all you have to do is think about your heart opening, and your shoulders go back a little bit, your chest opens up a little bit, your breathing's a bit freer, rather than got to pump that blood around. Next one is a quote from Buckminster Fuller, I like him. He says good things. Not alive anymore, but he's an engineer, and he was big with geodesic domes, and he designed a lot of interesting things. So what he says is, we must do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. It's a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery, because according to the Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living. I think that's great. Now, I am not getting into universal basic income or anything like that, but just as an idea, I have had this since for as long as I can remember, because I had that, I was in school and I used to ask the maths teacher, how does this thing you're teaching us, how does it apply practically? And, he'd go, oh, well, this is to do with compound interest and it's useful for this thing, or percentages for that other thing. At some point, he kind of went, can you stop asking me that question? So kind of school for me was a bit like, I don't get it. Like, what's the point? I mean, I liked art and all that kind of thing. But unless it sort of spoke to me, it didn't make any sense. And then I went from that into like a carpentry apprenticeship, and it was like, oh, that's it, now you're going to be a carpenter, And I would look around at all my friends and they were like, oh, that's it now, I'm a plumber or I'm a bricklayer or whatever. I was like, wow, really? Is this it? Is this what it's, that's the end of it? So I've been self-employed pretty much most of my life. I mean, I've worked in companies, I've worked and I had lots of different jobs. But this idea of, you have to justify your existence, it always just didn't seem like it was right. So it's nice to hear somebody like Buckminster Fuller, who was very much kind of in his heyday in the 60s and 70s, and he was this very kind of straight-laced looking sort of fellow, he's always in a suit and tie and, good on the maths and engineering and all that kind of thing. So for him to say something like that, it's very encouraging. It's very helpful. And letting go, I think just even letting go of the idea that you have to earn a living, there's always a choice. There's always a choice. And you might not like what that choice is, but it's really helpful to kind of remember that you do have a choice, And it's like, well, I have to have it, to live. I have to earn money to live, That's not true. That's not true at all. What really you're saying is, I have to earn money to live the lifestyle I want. There's a big difference, because as I said before, when you're involved in consciousness or in the spiritual life, you'll always have food and you'll always have shelter. You mightn't like either. You mightn't like the food and you mightn't like the shelter, but you'll always be taken care of. That's been my experience, And then, of course, the other thing that goes along with that is never settle for less. That's an overriding principle I've had in my life. Because when you settle for less, you nearly always get less than what you settled for. And I have found that to be true. And it's hard to stick with that when there's fear around. But I have found that to be true, is to just not settle for less. Always, because life expands, life is bountiful. And if you don't settle, then it will continue to grow. But if you do settle, you will generally get less than what you settled for. And that's been my experience too. Okay, next one is it's one of these kind of shock ones. It's just big bold letters and it says, the only way out is through. And that is true. In my experience, that is true. And it's counterintuitive, because when you're in pain, emotional pain, you naturally just want to withdraw from it. You naturally want to pull your hand out of the emotional fire. But it's different to pain on the outside, because on the outside, if you did happen to put your hand in the fire, I mean, who does that? Where does that even come from? Anyway, if you happen to put your hand in the fire, you would naturally pull it out. You wouldn't even have to think about it. You would just reflexively withdraw your hand. When you come across a fire on the inside, an emotional fire, emotional pain, you naturally want to run away from it. But it doesn't work like that on the inside. When you run away from a pain on the inside, it runs after you. It stays with you. You can't get away from it, So the only way through it is to go through it, which sounds awful. And it is. But what I have found is, when I when I turn and face whatever it is that I'm feeling and go, okay, let me have it. Let me feel this as much as it is. It gets worse temporarily. Gets worse for about 5 minutes, and then it starts to go. Then it starts to ease. Whereas when I am trying to distract myself from it over and over and over again with different things, it stays. I just can't get away from it. So it's one of those difficult truths that the only way out is through. God, the only way out is through, but it's true. Okay, the next one is a picture of a very woolly sheep. And what I've written about it is, I say, I love this. This sheep escaped from a farm and spent 6 years in the mountains, during which time he grew 60 pounds of wool. Wolves tried to eat him, but their teeth could not penetrate the floof. Moral of the story? You don't have to turn hard to survive the wolves. Just be really, really soft and fluffy. That's lovely, isn't it? It's a lovely story, it's a lovely image, and it's a lovely idea of that to survive the wolves, you don't have to turn hard. You just have to remain really soft and fluffy. Very innocent little meme, very innocent little story. It's a quote. I have that in quotation marks. Who would have thought it would have caused a bit of controversy? It did a little bit last time I posted it, and a little bit more this time. This time it actually got fact checked. So it has a little thing on it now that sort of says, what does it say? I wrote it down. Fact check, partly false story about Shrek, a very woolly sheep from New Zealand. So it turns out that this picture is of a sheep called Shrek, who did run away and was in the wilds for 6 years and did gain 60 pounds of wool. And just to give you an idea of how much wool that is, I read somewhere that it's the equivalent of 20 suits of clothes for large men. I don't know why they just didn't add another suit. Why not say 21 suits of clothes for men? Anyway, so yeah, this is Shrek. Now, the controversial bit is, and this is just between you and I, there are no wolves. There are no wolves in New Zealand. Okay. I think everybody knew that, Number one, nobody really cares that the sheep is from New Zealand. Nobody really cares whether the wolves are real or not. It's the story. Now, that's coming from me, an Irishman who, like Irish people, and certainly me anyway, I never let the facts get in the way of a good story. And that's a good story. Because the principle is true, Well, I don't know whether it's true. It's true in my experience that like turning hard on the inside to survive the wolves. It just means that means the wolves have won because you've become one of them. You've become hard, So remaining soft means that you will be soft for your whole life and you'll live inside a soft body. And I would much prefer that. So yes, very controversial story there, very controversial meme, fact checked and everything. Okay, the next one I didn't write. It's a little bit like the previous one, just big letters, be your own souvenir, And I think this one is a little bit like a Zen koan because what does that even mean, be your own souvenir? Initially, I'm like, what? My brain melts a little bit. It's like, what, be what? And I think what it means is, for me, what does it mean for you? Well, feel free to, write to me and tell me. But for me, it is about, it's thinking about life as somewhere you go to, existence as being somewhere you go to. And what are you going to take back from that place that you go to? Because that's the context I think of souvenirs in, is some little small thing to remind you of your trip. And this is a bit of, I'm in the middle of writing about this actually at the moment because I'm talking about my mother's house. And sure, I may as well tell you about it while we're here. And what I'm writing about is when my mother passed away in 2019, it wasn't a shock. She had been going downhill slowly for about 10 years and fast in the last year. So by the time she actually passed away, it wasn't a surprise. But then 6 months later, after her house had been sold, and I was collecting just a few little things from her house that were meaningful to me, and I knew had been meaningful to her. That's when it was shocking, because her house, like I moved out of home when I was 21. I would have moved out of her house when I was 21. And, I've never owned a house. I've always rented. And I think I counted it up for this thing I'm writing. I've moved 26 times. So I've had 26 different houses, okay? Now, part of that is me rebelling against things and I'm not going to settle down. But mostly it's been like, why would I? I've never been that into material possessions. I like nice things. I like things that are well made and well designed. But one of everything is enough for me. I don't need 4 or 5 of things. It makes me feel uncomfortable and a bit weighed down. But my mother, on the other hand, she left her home, her parents' home, when she was 21. And she lived in that house for 60 plus years. And, she made that house the kind of center of everything, and, drew the family around her to that house. And there's also so many memories of different things that had happened in that house that I hadn't realized that it had kind of become a bit of a monolith in my head. And somewhere I kind of thought it would just keep going. So to go there when everything was being, because I've got four brothers and a sister, or 3 brothers and a sister. And, we were all doing the same thing, just going and taking little things, and we could have emptied the house if we'd wanted. Like it wasn't a case of, there wasn't anything off limits. We were taking what we wanted, but there was a lot of stuff we didn't want. And it was very strange to kind of see her house, which was like a representation of her life, just disintegrating like her body had done. It's like as soon as that kind of force, the kind of mobilizing force at the center of her life was gone, everything just started to drift away. And it's very hard to be there and kind of not go, yeah, this is probably going to happen with my life as well, Now, for me, it's not a big deal because I don't have a lot of things anyway. So the idea, but I'm not that invested in that. And I'm kind of seeing, like for a long time, I've like known that I'm not that interested in material possessions because it's like you can't take them with you, So my whole focus has been on the inside, it makes me sound lovely and holy, but I don't mean it in that way. What I've been doing was, because as soon as you turn the focus on the inside, I realized that I've got to let go of things on the inside, let go of my personality, let go of the cult of me on the inside, because it is, like in the same way as my, mother's house became a bit monolithic for me. I noticed that I am a bit monolithic for me as well, which is why I kind of go on about deep dreamless sleep so much. Because in deep dreamless sleep, it's really obvious that everything that I think that's really important about me is just gone, There's nothing there. There's no personality. I've got no memory of it, no consciousness, nothing. It's absolute nothing to speak of. And the reason I add that little to speak of thing at the end is because when I come back from it, I feel refreshed. So from deep dreamless sleep. So something is going on there, but I'm just not conscious of it. So this idea of being your own souvenir for me kind of speaks to all of that. It speaks to like what I've been focusing on is on cultivating what I can bring with me, what does travel with me, even though it all disappears every night. It's certainly, there's a much more higher likelihood of me bringing my internal state with me than my car, for example. So, yeah. And I think the idea of it being a souvenir is that it's like what you, who you become in your life, that it becomes a thing of beauty for you and a thing of affection and a thing of that you like to look at and like to be with. That seems like a good aspiration to me. Next one I did write I only wrote it very recently, yesterday or the day before. And it says, your fears are justified for as long as you justify your fears. What? Your fears are justified for as long as you justify your fears. Okay, and I think that's a very important thing to see. That it's a circle. Because if you justify your fears, then your fears will be justified. So for as long as you are going, I better check if I left something on. I better check if I have enough money in my bank account. I better check if I have, there's enough air in the car tires. I better check, these kind of things. And often these kind of things are the sort of things my mind, don't know about you, but I'm guessing I'm not unusual in this. These are the sort of things that my mind loves to throw in there when I'm about to go to sleep. And I have no possibility of being able to get up and check any of this stuff. Not no possibility, but it's like, I'm not going to get up and check that now. And my mind goes, did we leave a light on downstairs? Or did we leave the stove on? Or I wonder if there's enough air in the car, in the tires, or whatever, The idea of your fears being justified is if you make preparations for the worst, in my experience, the worst comes. And you could kind of go, well, that's a very naive, unrealistic approach to life. And I agree, it is. But then I'm not interested in being realistic. I'm interested in having the reality that I want. And I'm interested in having the inner state that I want. And in my experience, anything that's happened to me disastrously, I could not have planned for. I couldn't have come up with a strategic plan for how to manage it. Okay, it just happened and I dealt with it, and so far I've survived. That's all I can say about it. I can't say, it was because of my extensive pre-planning and foresight that allowed me to be able to avoid that. Now, my mind is great at this stuff. It's great at planning for the future. And I am pretty good at kind of if I'm going on a journey, for example, I will kind of think forward and try and make it as easy for myself as I can. But there is a kind of little fearful voice there all the time that would like to prepare for the worst. And I just won't have it. I won't have it because I don't want to give that any energy. And whatever happens, I'll deal with it, or it'll kill me. I mean, something's going to kill me, maybe. I mean, that's not my preference. It's not what I'm not aiming for it. I don't want to die of anything. I just want to die. But, I have to say it in those terms because my mind is designed to protect me. So it thinks in terms of life and death. So to help it calm down, I use that kind of language. I go, well, it's not going to kill me. And if it does, it does. But I'm not going to bring that energy inside me of preparing for the worst. So that's what that means to me. Your fears are justified for as long as you justify your fears. So for as long as you justify your fears, you will have things that will happen that will justify your fears. So it's a way of dismantling that or decoupling it. Farm news, mist. A lot of mist at the moment. And I'm saying that the mist is there for me because of the mystery. In Irish mythology, the mist is always, it's not always, but it's one of the ways to transition into the fairy realm, through the mist, or it'll be a tree or a cave or something like that. So when the mist comes down like that, I always kind of think, the mystery is close. The mystery is close at hand. So I've been digging, As you'll see a little bit in a minute, I did a little bit of talking from the top of one of my little hills that I'm smoothing out. I have been drawn to go down the valley to meet my ancestors, which I wrote about in last week's friendly little note. And been planning that, been trying to do that for a couple of weeks now, and it's either the rain has been not great or I haven't been able to get someone to sit with the dogs or whatever. But yeah, I think I'm going to go tomorrow. So we'll see. Let's see how that goes. Hey, did you know these podcasts are on YouTube if you're listening? And if you are listening and you go to YouTube, you can see the beautiful nature that I live in because I often go outside to answer the questions. Did you know I have a blog? I write things, and I also send out a friendly note every Sunday. So if you'd like to get a friendly note from me, go to furtheremergence.com. If you'd like to write to me, I love hearing from you. It's john@furtheremergence.com as well. You can write to me, you can ask me a question, ask me what my perspective is on something, or just tell me what a wonderful life you're having. Love hearing all that stuff. I'm in the middle of a meditation training. Next week's the last week. It's been going very well, and it's available. You can still participate. There's only one live one left, but the recordings are all there. So if you're interested in meditation for growth in consciousness, that's the perspective I come at it from, which makes meditation sort of spread out into your whole life. It's not just this thing that you go and do, like going to the gym. It's using meditation to help you grow your consciousness. So yeah, that's on the website, furtheremergence.com. You'll see a link to it. Now, in response to the question I post on Instagram, what's the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment in your spiritual life? Somebody said, discipline, consistency, and feeling that I'm stuck in this period of my life. I can't accurately determine a goal, and if I succeed to set something in my head as a goal, I don't have the discipline to persevere with it. I sabotage myself a lot. It's probably about useless beliefs that are in my subconscious. So I'm interested in how to get to the subconscious and reprogram attitudes, perceptions, and what I believe in, if you can understand me.
Yes, I do understand you. And I would encourage you to see that there's nothing new in giving yourself a hard time. Because we've all done it. We've all thought we've got no discipline. We've all thought we've sabotaged ourselves. It's kind of circular, and it takes up a huge amount of energy that you could be using for other things. So if you see this kind of thing and you see a pattern, well, it's always good to get help. So you could come and see me for some one-to-one work. You could find someone who does rapid resolution therapy or craniosacral therapy and see if there's some sort of underlying trauma there that's keeping that in place. But as well as that, you could stop giving yourself a hard time, not because you think you don't deserve it, but because you want to manage your energy, okay? Because for as long as you're giving yourself a hard time, you don't have a huge amount of energy to see what's really going on underneath that, okay? So you've tried giving yourself a hard time and it hasn't really gone anywhere. So what I suggest is you come from the place of, I am here in my life figuring something out about myself. I don't know what it is, but there's some reason why I'm here. I've drawn all these different circumstances to me to help me figure this out. You know, I was born this gender at this time to these parents in this country. These things happened to me. It all has a meaning. There's all a significance to it. And if I begin to look for that significance, if I begin to look for what it is I might be trying to figure out, then I have a much better chance of finding it. Because you'll never find something that you don't even start to look for, okay? So you could look at the different circumstances and go, why did I have that goal in the first place? It's interesting. Of all the goals I could have had, I had that one. I picked that one. And why did I pick that one? That's interesting. And then I pick this goal, and then I don't do anything about it. That's interesting. Or I pick this goal and then I do it for a week and then I stop. Okay. Now, if you come from the place of there's no good reason why I didn't follow through on that. My friend had exactly the same goal and they did follow through on it. So if it's possible for one person to do it, it's possible for me to do it. Okay, all things being equal, but all things are not equal because you're not having the same experience as your friend. You're not working out the same things in your life about yourself that your friend is. So when you compare yourself to somebody else, it's an invalid comparison because you don't know what they're trying to figure out. That's why they're able to do it and you weren't, okay? But if you kind of come from the position of, oh, it's because I'm a failure, well, then you'll miss it. You'll miss what it is that you're trying to figure out about yourself. Because as you begin to look and go, why did that? Why did I pick that theme? And then why did I not do anything about it? Okay. Does this remind me of some other time? Yes, it is. Maybe you kind of come to the thing of, just to give you an example of the sort of line of thinking, you might kind of go, well, it's because I'm weak. I've done this so many times before. I say I'm going to do something. I've got no discipline. I'm just weak. Okay. Then you might notice, yeah, okay. So weakness is kind of the opposite of powerfulness. So maybe I am wondering something about myself to do with power. Maybe there's a question I've got about power, how powerful I am I powerful, am I weak? That's interesting. And what's also interesting is now that I think about it, I seem to have been around powerful people all my life, or they've been close to me. Isn't it interesting that I've got up close and personal to very powerful people, and then I have this question maybe in myself about my power and how powerful I am. And then, you begin to sort of see patterns, and all the time it's like you have this big whiteboard inside and you're like continually adding things and rubbing things out, and you're developing this working theory about what you might be trying to figure out in your life. And you'd miss all that if you just stuck on, oh, I didn't have any discipline, I'm just rubbish at this kind of thing. You'll miss all that if you do that. So that's what I'd suggest. Stop giving yourself a hard time and use all the energy that you would have used to give yourself a hard time to begin this investigation into your question, what it is that you're figuring out in your life. Okay? And I go into that a lot more in my book, Why Do We Get Sick? Why Do We Get Better? This whole idea of the question and what we're all figuring out in our lives about ourselves.
So, in response to the question, what's the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment in your spiritual life? This person says, breaking old patterns. I'm just feeling a bit lost with the law of attraction, which seems kind of cruel that some go through bad experiences as children and then develop these insecurities, fears, and self-limiting beliefs that play out subconsciously in our lives through toxic relationships and stuff. And even though I'm aware of the patterns and addictions I've developed from unmet needs, it's so difficult to change the behaviors and learn how to self-love after feeling so rejected by the world for so long.
Well, breaking old patterns is not easy, but it starts with being conscious of them. It's amazing how much shifts just from being conscious with them. Definitely get help. There are some great ways of shifting old patterns: rapid resolution therapy, one-to-one sessions with me, craniosacral therapy, lots of help. Okay, so definitely think about getting help. But don't underestimate the power of your consciousness. That just being able to see yourself acting out from an old pattern, that begins the process of it changing. Because before you saw that, you were just doing it automatically. You were just operating out of it automatically. And wondering why you were miserable, or why things weren't working out, or why relationships were a disaster, or whatever it is. Once you kind of know, oh, this is an old thing I am just operating out of, it's very easy to kind of minimize that and go, well, that's great. Now I know what I'm doing, but is that going to stop it? It does stop it over time. Because what happens is your consciousness begins to speed up, and let's say you have an argument with somebody and then a week later you realize, oh my God, that had nothing to do with what I was arguing about. That was to do with an old thing from my childhood, okay? The next time that happens and something comes up in you like that, maybe it'll take you 6 days to make the connection. And then the next time, maybe it'll take you 5 days and 4 days and 3 and so on. Your consciousness begins to speed up for it and you start to see it quicker, okay? But because we get into this loop of like, oh my God, I'm just going to be caught in this, I'm going to forever be reacting to this thing. It feels like it's never going to end, but it will end. It definitely will end. And your consciousness speeds up, and the more you see it in operation, the value goes down. That's the thing that happens to us, is we begin to, it loses its value. We don't believe in it as much. It can't take us over as much as it can, And the law of attraction stuff is great as an idea, as a sort of working principle, but anything that you find yourself giving yourself a hard time about, immediately it loses all usefulness, okay? So if you hear yourself giving yourself a hard time about, oh my God, the law of attraction, I just have to think about it and then it should be here, and what's wrong with me? I'm not doing it. I'm just terrible at manifestation. Then that's no use to you anymore. That's just it's been absorbed by the parts of you that like to give you a hard time about things. So it's not useful anymore. It started off being useful. It's useful as a principle. It's useful as a beautiful idea. And maybe it's useful that it may actually work, but it might work for other people, but maybe it doesn't work for you. And if you kind of go, well, what's wrong with me then suddenly it's not useful anymore, because it's just gone into that loop, okay? So it's fine to think about it, and if it works for you, great, and for some people it works brilliant, but they're working out a different kind of thing. They've got we've all got such different things that we're working out for ourselves that it's pointless to compare ourselves to other people or to principles, Like, it's not just because it's possible doesn't mean it's possible for you, because you're working out a different thing. And with children and, the injustices that happens, who knows? Who knows why this, thing happened to that person? You can't know that. It's hard enough to know what's gone on for ourselves. And really, it doesn't matter, because you're not living their life. And it just puts the brakes on you investigating your own life, kind of comparing yourself to other people. And what about this person? What about that? It doesn't help. And like, it's hard enough to do this stuff anyway. So anything that gets in the way, it's like, well, it's no longer useful. So just jettison it, just dump it, and just keep going with this thing of like, meditation helps, of course, as well, to speed up your consciousness so that you get ahead of these old patterns. But they're not easy to shift. And sort of knowing that they're not easy to shift gives you a little bit of kindness towards yourself, to kind of know, over time, through me continuously seeing myself operating out of these old patterns, means that it will happen less, I will realize it quicker, and it will diminish over time.
That's all I've got for you this time. I trust you're well, I trust you're of good cheer, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.